Welcome to Paul's Passive House. In today's episode of Paul's Passive House, we're going to try something a little different. I recently traveled to Europe for the first time, and I'd like to share with you what I learned. As far back as I can remember, I've always wanted to live in Europe. In fact, I was flipping through an old journal of mine, dated back in 1998, penned when I was just 19, and as I fingered through its seemingly endless pages of embarrassingly sappy poems written for forgettable women, lamentations of love lost, and frank discussions on the crushing effects of sexual frustration, I noticed a pattern. I spent a lot of time daydreaming about living in Europe and meeting European women. Finally, in September of this year, that's 2024, I made my first trip overseas. I spent 32 days there, broken up between London, Amsterdam, Brussels, and Paris, essentially spending a week in each city. My goal was to find a place to live permanently. As I was planning this trip, I did a fair amount of research in order to understand the quality of life standards in Europe compared to North America. And the number that kept coming up was 25 years. Most of the reports that I found estimated that Europe is 20 or perhaps 25 years ahead of North America. This number was across the board in all of the categories that are used to determine quality of life. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to focus on the standards that relate to Passive House. So today, we're going to be discussing building code, building stock, and convenience. And in these areas in particular, Europe is more like 150 or perhaps 200 years ahead of North America. Let's start with the flat I rented in London. It was a typical one-bedroom London flat. It was about 600 square feet and had been remodeled sometime in the last 10 years. As you can see, the finishes are nice. Not top of the line, but very pleasing. As I got settled in, I noticed some vents in the bedroom, kitchen, and bathroom. Initially, I was dumbfounded. Surely this flat didn't have a heat recovery ventilation system. But after careful inspection, some of you might call this snooping, I found a heat recovery ventilator located in a utility closet. I was astonished. After all, what are the chances that some randomly chosen flat in South London would have an HRV installed that could pass a passive house inspection? But there it was. My curiosity got the better of me, and I inspected the unit's filters. They were filthy. So naturally, I cleaned them. Then I figured out that if I turned on the bathroom lights or the under cab lights in the kitchen, it triggered a booster fan in the HRV unit. So when you use the bathroom, or if you turn on the kitchen lights to cook, it boosts the fan speed of the system to help air out the apartment. That's smart. After playing around with the system a little, I contacted the owner to ask about the system. Specifically, I wanted to know when they installed it. The owner had no idea what I was talking about. She didn't know anything about the system, what it did or how it worked. She didn't even know that it had filters to clean, which is probably why they were so dirty. So I scanned the QR code on the machine and looked it up. There, I found all the specs and particulars. I hadn't even heard of this brand, and I didn't know that the UK made these. As it turns out, this company doesn't ship to the US, so if you want to see pricing, you have to use a VPN and change your location to the UK. This unit was comparable in price to the lower quality units available in North America, but with much better efficiency ratings and better accessories. Just take a look at the ductwork that you can buy at their website. You aren't going to find anything like this for a Honeywell or Fantech system in North America. Now, let's have a look at the heating system. This is an infrared heating panel. The apartment had 3 of them mounted to the walls in various locations. They are 230 volt, 2,000 watt panels. In my estimation, they're a little oversized for the square footage in this flat, especially when you consider the high-quality doors and windows, but I'm not going to dwell on that for the moment. These panels are completely customizable, compatible with all smart home systems, and can operate at half output in eco mode. If you live in the United States, please take a moment, pause this video, and Google infrared panel heaters. Here, wait, you know what? I'll do it for you. Assuming that you can even find something similar in North America, which you can't, take a look at the price. And that's just for one panel. Now, imagine that you need one of these for every room in your house, or at least pretty close to every room. Then notice that these units aren't even sold with the same output. These are 1,000 watt units. So you will potentially need 2 of these in each room. Look, this retailer even shows 2 of them mounted on the ceiling. That's $2,000 plus tax and shipping and installation to heat one room. And that is assuming that you can find someone who knows how to install these, which you won't. Seriously, what the fuck? Now, I want you to guess how much this unit costs in the UK. If you guessed £121.46, you were correct. It's no wonder why these units are sold out on the manufacturer's website. Using my VPN, I went to Amazon UK and found these units available for, you guessed it, £134.80, delivered. And Amazon said they were in stock. Let me be crystal clear here. Infrared heating technology isn't new, special, or exotic. It's not particularly complicated. It doesn't have intricate parts that need servicing or calibration. It's just a basic plug-and-play electric heating source. In fact, I'm using it right now to heat my house, except the units I have, since I live in North America, are these ugly, stupid-looking cabinets, which, by the way, are still more expensive than these sleek, modern units sold in the UK. There's absolutely no reason why these infrared panels cost $1,000 each. These North American prices are absurd. But let's move on. The next thing I noticed in my London flat were the water heaters. There were 3. There was a point-of-use 4-gallon unit located in the kitchen, hidden away under the cabinets, a point-of-use 4-gallon unit in the utility room, and a booster unit located in the shower. These provided me with instant hot water at all the sinks and in the shower. The shower unit was of special interest to me. It was mounted to the wall and resembled this unit here. It took a minute to get used to using it, but after I had it set where I wanted, it functioned nicely. I must admit, though, that the showering experience wasn't great. The water flow through the shower head was pretty low, probably due to the fact that it was a low-flow shower head and had built up some hard water scale. Also, the wall-mounted unit wasn't the best quality. However, after I played with it a while, I did figure out that if I turned up the temperature on the wall-mounted unit at the beginning of my shower, it lasted much longer and had a much higher flow rate. That was because the wall-mounted unit was mixing the cold water that it was heating with the preheated water from the 4-gallon unit in the utility room. So as long as I kept the wall-mounted unit close to its highest setting, I could get a comfortable hot shower at the highest possible pressure. But the pressure did fall pretty dramatically once the 4 gallons of preheated water was used up. This is because the wall heating unit couldn't heat the cold water fast enough for the temperature setting I had selected. To compensate for this, it automatically slowed down the flow of water. I did some research, though, and found point-of-use shower heaters like the one I used in London with strong enough heating elements to accommodate higher water flow rates. So this problem has an easy solution. My guess is that whoever remodeled this house just chose the cheapest, nice-looking shower water heater they could find and didn't pay much attention to flow rates. As you can probably guess, installing water heaters like these are incredibly efficient. use less water, and provide for a comfortable user experience. So at this point, you might be asking yourself, what's the punchline? Well, to put it directly, you are never going to find any passive house components in any building here in the United States randomly, especially in an apartment located in the blue-collar neighborhood of your city. The fact that I just happened to rent an apartment with multiple passive house components already installed demonstrates that in Europe, even in the lower class communities, high-quality building science standards are being implemented. The only buildings in North America that have any passive house elements of any kind are designed by millionaires, funded by millionaires, and ultimately used by millionaires. They are the only people that can afford to care about building science. The rest of us are either too poor, too dumb, too busy, or all of the above. And if I'm being perfectly frank, most people are all of the above. Not only that, but the code standards in North America are grossly out of date. Most homeowners only do the minimum that's required of them, if that. So remodels and new builds are most often poorly planned and executed. Plus, when you take into account that the people that work in the code enforcement industry are undereducated, underfunded, and largely uninterested in doing their jobs, there is a lot of substandard construction being built and retrofitted. Finally, the vast majority of contractors don't know about or understand the basics of building science, have never even heard the phrase passive house, and largely have convinced themselves that they're the best at what they do, whilst simultaneously providing overpriced, substandard work. This means that while they're vastly undereducated, they already believe that they are the best. Thus, they have very little incentive to learn about building science. This is a recipe for disaster, and that's largely what we see in North American building stock: disaster. Europe doesn't have these problems because their building codes are largely updated to include state-of-the-art building science. Their installers and code enforcers are well educated and well paid. And their citizens, even the ones that have no concept of building science, like the person I rented my apartment from, reap the benefits. As an example, take Brussels. They updated all their building codes to the passive house standard in, you guessed it, 2015. That's nearly 10 years ago. Mix all of these elements together, and you can start to see why Europe is so far ahead of North America and why they have a much higher quality of life. Europeans breathe cleaner indoor air because they have heat recovery ventilators. Europeans live in more comfortable homes, pay less for that comfort, and have more spending money despite having higher taxes. Much of this prosperity can either be directly or indirectly linked to higher building code standards, better implementation of those standards, and a more knowledgeable workforce. If you'd like a free energy efficiency consultation, please email me at paulspassivehouse@gmail.com.